Tonight, President Trump takes center stage at the U.S. Capitol,
We're not going to be tearing down, we're going to be building up.
laying out his second-term vision while defending early decisions on Ukraine and foreign alliances, trade and tariffs, and cutting the federal workforce. We have a look ahead as well as in-depth analysis. Plus, Congress responds to the recent mishaps in aviation,
It is literally safer than walking out of your own front door.
looking for ways to revamp the FAA to make flying safer, and healing through horses.
They're prey animals, so they actually are very intuitive.
How ministries are harnessing animals to address everything from addiction to grief to paralysis. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. President Trump prepares to speak to the nation. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, in his first major speech since returning to the White House, President Trump addresses a joint session of Congress and the nation, making the case for his second-term agenda so far and for the next 4 years. For a preview, CBN's Michelle London joins us now on Capitol Hill. Michelle, it was 5 years ago that the president last addressed Congress. What can we expect to hear from the president tonight?
Well, first, let's talk about what we feel in the atmosphere. There's energy, the expectation, and a sense of angst here on the Hill as we get closer to the president's address. Tonight's theme is the renewal of the American dream. President Trump posting to his Truth Social earlier that tonight will be big, and he will tell it like it is. Earlier, I spoke to Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn about what she's expecting for tonight.
It's amazing to me how much he has gotten done, and announcement after announcement, world leader after world leader coming into the Oval Office to meet with him, executive orders, and of course DOGE, and they're finding about $4 billion a day in savings, and I think the president's going to have some things to say about that.
A big portion of President Trump's address tonight before the House and Senate will recap his accomplishments during his first 6 weeks in office. He'll talk about creating a federal government overhaul driven by DOGE that includes dismantling USAID and moving to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and discuss immigration and the fact that illegal border crossings have dropped to the lowest number in decades. A hot button topic for tonight, pausing military aid to Ukraine. And we expect more context on that after Friday's intense back and forth with Zelensky in the White House. Now, according to Sophia Kai from Politico, when it comes to the economy, he may point to the Biden administration, which he's done on the campaign trail. And on the other side of the aisle, Kai says Democrats could potentially bring in fired federal workers and highlight the consequences this may have on the future economy. John?
Michelle, I know some Democrats are planning not to attend tonight's address, but the Democrats do have a planned response after President Trump's speech. What can you tell us about that?
That is a good question. About 15 minutes after the president concludes his speech, tonight, Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin is expected to give a response on behalf of Democrats. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says he plans to attend tonight's address with other Democratic leaders. Releasing a statement ahead of tonight's speech, Jeffries says there is a strong opposition party ready, willing, and able, John, to serve as a check and balance on the excesses of this administration.
All right, CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you so much, Michelle. Well, Faith Nation contributor Nathan Gonzalez joins us now. He is also the editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, welcome to you. So the theme tonight is renewal of the American dream. Millions will be tuning in along with you and me, Nathan. So what are you expecting to see and hear tonight?
Well, stylistically, we've seen a few Trump speeches, and I expect the same. I expect this to be similar to his inaugural address that was not that long ago. And we're calling this a speech in front of the joint session because there is not a State of the Union in the same year as an inauguration. But, as Michelle said, we're going to hear about the accomplishments of the past few weeks. I think he's going to talk about what the administration wants to do moving forward. But what I'm interested in is if he has some expectation setting, because before he was elected, he talked about ending the war in Ukraine with a phone call. He talked about the price of goods coming down right when he got into office, and those things haven't happened. So, does he prepare the country and prepare Americans and voters for a longer period of him needing longer to work out the problems that he'll say were given to him by the Biden administration? So we'll see what he does on that front.
It'll be interesting to see that, along with some of the invited guests, including the family of Laken Riley and the family of Corey Comptour, the firefighter who died in Butler, Pennsylvania. You hit along these lines. According to recent polling, a majority of Americans think President Trump's administration is moving too quickly, cutting the federal workforce. And then, of course, we saw a stock slide this morning as Trump's tariffs went into effect. Could that signal problems with his agenda, particularly with the slim margins Republicans have in both houses of Congress?
Well, this is about outcomes, I think. Trump starts his second time in office with the benefit of the doubt from a majority of Americans because he is considered an outsider, a businessman. He's not a politician. And so if he comes up with a solution or idea, there's a chunk of Americans who believe that his solution is the right one. But if his policies, the things that the administration are doing, end up hurting them, for some, except for his core supporters, they're gonna turn, or at least they're gonna say that they don't like what he's doing, and he's gonna lose that benefit of the doubt. And some of the tension that we're seeing on Capitol Hill is that Trump is not going to face voters in 2026, but the Republicans on the Hill are going to face voters, and that's where you see some of this tension.
Michelle just reported that Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin will give the Democratic response. What more can you tell us about her and why she was selected to give the Democratic response?
It's really fascinating because Elissa Slotkin was one of a handful of Democratic women with military or national security backgrounds. Elissa Slotkin was a former CIA operative, and this group of women were elected to the House in 2018, 2 years after Trump won his first election. And now we're seeing them come to prominence after Trump's second election. Slotkin, she was in the House. She was just elected to the Senate from Michigan, which is one of the 7 core states. And then you also have some of her colleagues from that class, former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who's running for governor in Virginia this year, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, who's running for governor in New Jersey this year. And so it feels a little bit like deja vu because you have the same group that Democrats relied on to get back some power or control in Trump's first term. They're relying on them again this time around.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez from Inside Elections. We always appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Good to see you, John.
Well, as President Trump prepares to address Congress tonight, his new tariffs on America's 3 largest trading partners are making waves. Trump is now imposing a 25% tariff on all goods coming from Mexico and Canada, plus an extra 10% on Chinese products, bringing the total on China's imports to 20%. Canada is pushing back, planning to slap tariffs on $100 billion worth of U.S. goods over the next 21 days, including Kentucky bourbon. Mexico is also promising a response to be announced on Sunday. China isn't holding back either, equating Trump's actions to, quote, bullying and adding new 10% to 15% tariffs on all U.S. exports on things like chicken, wheat, soybeans, and beef. Investors were rattled by the news, and stocks dropped while gold surged. Well, Ted Rossman joins us now. He is a senior industry analyst at Bankrate. Welcome to you, Ted. So the Wall Street Journal editorial gave a withering assessment of today's move. Ted, how will these new tariffs affect everyday Americans, and will we see higher prices at grocery stores and maybe even car dealerships?
Yes, that's something that's already on the way. In fact, Target just announced their earnings. They're talking about higher prices hitting the shelves in the coming weeks. There are estimates that certain car prices could go up as much as about $12,000, which sounds crazy, but you think about the math. I mean, that's about 25% of $48,000, which is right about the average new car price. So the math works out. Same thing with a larger appliance like a washing machine. I mean, prices there could go up by $100 per unit. So yeah, this is kind of the last thing people want at a time that we're still strained by inflation. I know the rates come down a lot, but it's not yet back to the Fed's 2% target, and this could make that inflation fight a lot more difficult.
Well, you just talked about big ticket items. Some predict prices will go up $1,200 to $1,300 on the same purchases people make today with those new tariffs. Yet Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent over the weekend on Face the Nation defended the move, saying that the imposed tariffs from Trump's first administration did not affect prices. But that was before stubborn inflation set in. So, Ted, what do you anticipate this time around?
There are a few key differences this time around. One is that inflation is starting from a much higher base. And I know the rates come down to the mid-2s, so it's close to the target, but we do have to acknowledge the cumulative effect. In total, prices are up more than 20% from the beginning of 2021. So that's really what's been stressing people out. Even though the job market's been good, wages in many cases have not kept pace with those rising costs. The other big thing is that the tariffs are both wider and deeper this time around. So first term, it was more of a select group of products. It was steel, it was aluminum, it was things like that. Now it's more across the board. It's everything coming from Mexico, everything coming from Canada, China. European Union tariffs seem to be coming soon. So the scale is much greater this time around.
Well, Canada and Mexico and China are all responding with their own tariffs. Ted, how could trade tensions affect jobs, wages, and the overall economic growth in the coming months?
Well, one of the justifications for tariffs, at least domestically, is this whole buy American, make American kind of thing. And sure, we love our American companies, although we do have to acknowledge that we import a lot of goods as well. The problem, though, for these American-based companies is if it's going to be pricier for them to sell their goods in other countries, that could have an offsetting effect. Trade wars are not a good thing to most economists. This ends up being kind of a race to the bottom. Everybody ends up losing. Now, I know there's a counterpoint. I know the Trump administration says, well, this is a useful negotiating tactic, not just for the economy, but also for the border and encompassing things like immigration and fentanyl. And I think it's interesting how the messaging has changed. I feel like the first term tariffs were more about buy American. I feel like now the messaging has shifted and it's more about the border and national security kind of issues.
Real quickly, the stock market dropped while gold surged. What does that signal about investor confidence in 1 or 2 sentences?
Investors are definitely worried about tariffs. They're worried about higher prices and the higher interest rates that could come along with them.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. Ted Rossman with Bankrate, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Well, in other news, regrettable. That's what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling last week's explosive Oval Office clash with President Trump, adding that he's ready to work under Trump's leadership to secure lasting peace. In a post on X, Zelensky outlined steps for peace, starting with the release of prisoners, a ban on airstrikes targeting civilians and Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and an immediate truce in the sea. His remarks came just hours after the U.S. froze military aid to Ukraine despite tensions. Zelensky says he's open to signing a new security and mineral deal with Washington. Today, Vice President Vance expressed optimism that the mineral deal could still happen.
I think the president is still committed to the mineral deal. I think we've heard some positive things, but not yet, of course, a signature from our friends in Ukraine. But look, the mineral deal is a really important part of the president's policy.
Meanwhile, Europe is stepping up. EU leaders are considering an $800 billion plan to strengthen defenses across member states and give Ukraine more military leverage in negotiations. An emergency summit is set for Thursday. Well, now to the latest in Israel. The country's top security agency, Shin Bet, admits it ignored warning signs before Hamas's deadly October 2023 attack, mistakenly believing that the group did not want war. This follows a military report last week acknowledging it underestimated Hamas and failed to protect civilians. Today in Cairo, Arab leaders endorsed a counterproposal to Trump's plan to depopulate Gaza. Their plan would allow Palestinians to remain in the territory. Meanwhile, Israel continues its blockade, cutting off food, fuel, and medicine to pressure Hamas into a ceasefire and hostage deal. Well, Well, here at home, the Trump administration is reviewing federal funding for Columbia University, accusing the school of failing to address anti-Semitism during last year's campus protests. Coming up, shortages, deadly airplane crashes, and near misses. Lawmakers sound the alarm on the safety of air traffic control next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. On Capitol Hill today, lawmakers examine concerns over flight safety and warnings about the country's air traffic control system. The hearing follows January's deadly mid-air collision over the Potomac River. CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke is following the situation and joins us now. Caitlin, so aviation experts say urgent action is needed to modernize outdated systems. So what exactly are they advising?
John, they're calling on the FAA to immediately address critical staffing shortages and upgrade air traffic control systems, many of which have been in place since the 60s.
In 2015, 16, 17, and 18, I testified in front of this committee and I said the status quo of the national airspace system is unacceptable.
75% of the 138 systems are unsustainable or potentially unsustainable.
It's not acceptable for controllers and technicians to have to work with paper strips and floppy disks.
Long considered to be aviation's gold standard, experts say America can no longer make that case, mainly due to aging infrastructure, outdated technology, and a broken hiring and training process.
The FAA has historically requested too little funding, and we now have a significant backlog of system and facility sustainment and replacement. Many FAA facilities have exceeded their expected life cycles.
Disruptions in government funding is also a major culprit. Since 2018, the FAA has experienced 3 government shutdowns combined with the threat of another 29. Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, explains the potential impact if the current March 14th funding deadline isn't met.
We would have a shutdown of the Oklahoma City Academy. Air traffic controllers wouldn't be paid. Programs in modernization would halt, would take months to restart. We would likely lose anywhere between 100 to upwards of 500 trainees.
In 2024, Congress passed the bipartisan FAA Reauthorization Act. It's designed to address staffing, safety, and significant modernization of air traffic control infrastructure, among other things. The issue, according to lawmakers, is that much of it hasn't been implemented.
2024 FAA Reauthorization Law took important steps toward improving safety and staffing. That law just needs to be followed.
Leaders say now is the opportunity to change the system because for the first time in decades, there's universal agreement from unions to airlines to operators. The Trump administration also supports investment in not only modernizing systems, but also hiring and salary increases for air traffic controllers. John?
Some sobering assessments there in your reporting there. CBN's Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Well, up next, healing through horsepower, changing lives through faith and animal therapy. Welcome back. From the trails of Texas to the show rings of California, horses fuel a $38 billion industry, and now they're at the center of a growing movement using equine therapy and faith to change lives. CBN's Brody Carter has more.
He is my pal.
Joe Most and his wife Penny found love more than 20 years ago through their shared passion for horses. Together, they run Perfect Partners Equine, living out their mission in Ridgeway, Virginia, and as they like to say, waiting on the Lord's return in their spurs and boots.
Oh, it's because God's coming back on a horse, and I want to be able to ride with him.
In the meantime, the couple trains horses while offering clinics and excursions, blending equine-assisted therapy with their faith.
They experience the horse. Hopefully they see God through us. We want God to shine his light, his face on us for the world to see. And hopefully they see the love of us through the horse.
And the Mosts are not alone. Across the U.S. and beyond, ranches like these demonstrate the power of healing through horses. The global market for equine therapy is expected to increase by 15% this year alone.
And the power of God to heal through these amazing animals is incredible.
A few states over in Weidman, Michigan, Jody Stuber and her husband Ty are also changing lives with horses at Hopewell Ranch.
So when you have somebody who comes into the ranch and they're so wounded by life circumstances, it's really our honor to just be. We try really hard to be welcoming and kind and loving, the way Jesus would be.
After the devastating loss of her baby, Hope, Jody says the Holy Spirit comforted her with the words, "Hope will rise again," sparking a vision to create a sanctuary for healing with horses.
They're prey animals, so they actually are very intuitive. They know how to read body language better than we do, and because that's their primary source of communication. And so if a person is struggling, they're going to pick up on it. If a person's angry, they're going to pick up on it. They just know what's going on inside of us, and honestly, a lot of times better than we do.
The ranch offers a wide range of beneficial programs, including Project Solomon, which helps veterans experiencing post-traumatic stress free of charge.
We'd love to see insurance pick this up, but right now we do a lot of fundraising, we do a lot of private pay to be able to do what we do.
And Jody adds that when God enters the arena, anything is possible.
We have a ringside seat to miracles. I have stories I could share of how God has really tangibly used these animals to provide what people need.
At both Hopewell Ranch and Perfect Partners Equine, the missions extend beyond therapy, with a focus on making this care accessible and showing how God's love can transform lives.
I guess my favorite saying is God's got a plan. Just ask him to stand next to you and let your heart be open to him and let him dictate to you what you're going to do. Be moldable like our horses are moldable to us.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Brody gets all the cool assignments. Well, coming up, a community unifies in the middle of wildfires. That's next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a show of support for first responders battling wildfires in North and South Carolina. Residents in Myrtle Beach are rallying to support hundreds of local firefighters. Many are working around the clock to keep the blazes at bay. Local businesses are donating sports drinks, eye drops, and food to help sustain the crews as a show of support.
It's been unreal, but we're very, very proud of our first responders, and we wanted them to feel, how proud we were by coming out here and stepping in and making sure they had what they needed so they could focus on what they were here to do.
Firefighters are so far managing to keep the fires from destroying homes in Horry County, and we always appreciate the work of our dedicated first responders. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow night.